king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 293, Improved Black Bread. After sending off the Spanish and Teutonic officers, Marin immediately turned his attention back to domestic construction. Now that an agreement had been reached, the 18,000 young and strong Saxon men would all be Marin's private serfs in the future. As a feudal landlord, how could Marin tolerate these people eating idle meals? Therefore, Marin immediately disbanded and reorganized these 18,000 strong men and began to form a construction team. Because Marin planned to dig ditches and canals. Of course, Marin also has a task, to expand the city of Auric. As the capital of East Frisia, Auric naturally cannot be as small as before. Moreover, the palace where Marin currently lived was too small and dark. Marin also planned to expand the palace, at least to a place with a large garden. At present, there is no farmland around the city of Auric. Therefore, Marin does not need to requisition farmland to expand the city. Although digging ditches and canals was important, Marin felt that building a new capital was also more important. Therefore, Marin decided to select a group of 18,000 young and strong people as a construction engineering team to expand the city of Auric. To this end, Marin specially sent people to select about 3,000 people who were skilled in masonry and stonemasonry from among the 18,000 young and strong men, and formed separate construction teams. As for the other 15,000 people, they were organized into reclamation teams, responsible for digging ditches and clearing swamps. In addition, Marin estimated that the Duke of Saxony would give priority to redeeming the knights. Therefore, the 7,000 regular infantry prisoners of war would not leave for a while. Marin would not support them for nothing, so under the supervision of the soldiers, these 7,000 regular infantry prisoners were also pulled over by Marin to work as coolies. As for the knights, Marin wanted to send them all to work in the fields. However, Marin was afraid of being criticized by the European nobles, so he gave up this tempting idea. Last time, Marin had the musketeers hammer a large number of heavy cavalry in plate armor to death in front of the battle, which had already been criticized by many people. If the knight captives were sent to the fields as laborers, they would probably be hostile to the knight class. Therefore, Marin had to support these people first. Of course, Marin would not feed these uncles with good food and drink. Usually, he would just let them eat some black bread. Moreover, this black bread was not the pure rye black bread that Marin's own army ate. The 18,000 young coolies were not given pure black bread. But because he was afraid that it would hurt the coolies' teeth, Marin ordered that no stones should be mixed into the black bread. In addition, Marin also forbade the addition of soil into the black bread. This was because soil was difficult to digest and would affect work. However, it was impossible for Marin to feed the prisoners pure black bread. So, what was used to adulterate it? There must be wild vegetables, which are food in themselves and can also increase vitamins. Sawdust can also be added, which is rich in cellulose. In addition, Marin has also introduced a new cheap additive, straw bran. In the previous life, Marin, who lived in the countryside, also raised pigs at home. Before pig feed became popular, the family often fed pigs with bran. There are two kinds of bran. One is grain bran, which is obtained by crushing the husk of rice. This kind of bran is very nutritious and is a very good feed. Similar to it is wheat bran. Of course, in Europe today, due to low grain production, wheat bran is also an important grain, which is mixed with flour to make bread. Even the pure black bread eaten by ordinary people contains wheat bran. Only in the pure black bread eaten by the nobles is the bran separated out. As for another common raw material for pig feeding, it is straw bran obtained by crushing rice straw or wheat straw. The nutritional value of straw bran is far inferior to that of grain bran, but it is also nutritious. Before the popularization of feed in rural pig farming, straw bran was the most common food for pigs at home. As for grain bran, it is considered as concentrated feed for pigs. Of course, straw bran is not nutritious, so fattening pigs do not eat it because it does not make them fat. Generally speaking, straw bran is fed to old sows. Because when old sows are not giving birth or feeding, they do not need high nutrition, as long as they are not hungry. Only when they are pregnant and feeding, they are fed with grain bran, which has higher nutrition. In other words, straw bran is something that can help you resist hunger, but it has little nutrition. Although the black-hearted Marin forbade bread to be mixed with stones and dirt, he secretly ordered people to mix straw bran into cheap black bread. After all, the cost of straw bran is extremely low. The raw material for producing straw bran is the rice straw used as fuel for rural earth stoves. However, one thing that bothers Marin is that straw bran is easy to obtain, but difficult to process in this era. Because Marin didn't have a high-speed rotating crusher, he couldn't quickly break the rye straw into straw chaff. Therefore, the current method of processing straw chaff is still the primitive stone milling, that is, putting the dry rye straw on the stone mill to grind it. However, it is difficult to grind rye straw into powder. If 10 kilograms of rye straw are put on, it is considered good if 1 kilogram can be ground. If it is replaced with rice straw, which is more difficult to grind, Marin estimates that he can't even grind out half a kilogram of straw chaff. After all, wheat straw is more brittle than rice straw and is relatively easier to grind. Fortunately, Marin has built a lot of Dutch windmills that drive stone mills, which does not require too much manpower. Then, rye straw is everywhere. Although it wastes some time, adding straw chaff to black bread is an excellent business behavior that saves costs. Originally, Marin was still very uneasy, thinking that he was too evil to let those coolies eat bran. In order to prevent the taste of black bread from deteriorating, Marin also specifically instructed the bakers to add less straw bran. However, Kohler, who was in charge of logistics, was even more evil than him. Marin ordered to add 20% straw bran to the bread, but Kohler directly asked to add 30%. In Kohler's opinion, Marin's idea of adding straw to bread was absolutely genius. Moreover, Kohler felt that adding straw was much kinder than adding stones and soil. You know, black bread with dirt and stones added to it is as hard as a brick and can be used to fight. It is also very hard on the teeth when eaten. But after replacing the soil and stones with straw, the black bread is no longer like a brick and tastes much softer. Although it cannot be compared with pure black bread, it is much better than those black stick black breads. At least, Kohler, who used to eat black stick bread for a long time, believes that black bread with added straw bran is more like food than black stick bread and tastes better. In this way, under the insistence of Kohler, who was in charge of logistics, all prisoners of war, except for the knights, usually ate mixed black bread with 10% wild vegetables, 10% sawdust and 30% straw bran. In other words, this kind of bread is only half rye flour. But what surprised Marin was that the prisoners of war, who were civilians, were not at all averse to this kind of bread. This is why Marin has never eaten real black baguette bread. The kind of black baguette that can be used as a brick, the unscrupulous boss can mix 20% of soil in it. When the soil is dried in the oven, how can it not be hard? Therefore, when eating black baguette, you often have to use hot water to melt it. Because you need to use hot water to soften the soil components, otherwise you can't eat it. The black bread mixed with straw bran is different. After all, straw bran is edible, although it is of a low quality. But for the poor people in the Middle Ages, the fact that the ingredients in bread are edible is already a good treatment. After all, straw bran can be digested by the stomach, but it is not nutritious, but at least it can resist hunger. Kohler even planned to promote black bread with straw bran throughout the country. Because this technology is too cost-effective. Replacing rye with cheap straw bran itself saves a lot of costs. For Europeans who advocate business, it is really a good deal. But Marin was against letting his people eat black bread containing 30% straw bran, because he needed strong people. Although straw bran was edible, it was not nutritious. If the people were skinny, when Marin needed to mobilize the people to serve in the army, he would recruit a bunch of skinny people with little strength. Therefore, Marin did not object to Kohler promoting straw bran bread in China. However, Marin requested that the proportion of straw bran be reduced by half, to 15%. This black bread with 15% straw bran added soon became popular in East Frisia and became the staple food of East Frisian town residents and fishermen. Then, this bread was also named Kohler black bread. As for the real creator, Marin, he thought it was a shameful thing, so he gave the credit to Kohler, who hosted it. But what surprised Marin later was that Kohler gained huge popularity because of his invention of the cheap Kohler black bread that was not hard on the teeth, which made Marin a little jealous. Chapter 294, Granada Colonization Project. Gonzalo de Córdoba came to East Frisia not only to learn the Marin Square from Marin. He also asked Marin to be ready for Columbus to lead the fleet south. Because the Spanish had already prepared ships and manpower to open up the Indian route under the leadership of Columbus. This time the Spanish made a big fuss. In order to guard against the Portuguese causing trouble, Spain directly deployed a luxurious lineup of 10 warships of over 200 tons. Moreover, the leader of the team was the famous Spanish navigator Alonso de Oviedo. Alonso de Oviedo once served as Columbus's deputy and participated in the voyage to explore America. He was the most outstanding navigator in Spain. When he heard the news, Marin frowned. History has indeed changed. Originally, in May 1499, Alonso de Oviedo was supposed to have led Amerigo and Fonseca to explore the American continent and discovered Venezuela in South America. The name of Venezuela was given by Alonso de Oviedo himself. In fact, this was a problem created by Marin himself. Through the Emperor and the Pope, Marin let all of Europe know that the India, discovered by Columbus, was actually a wild area. Therefore, the Spanish quickly lost interest in America. Therefore, Alonso de Oviedo's plan to explore America in 1499 did not exist. It just so happened that Marin gave the benefits of the Indian route to Spain, so Spain directly appointed Alonso de Oviedo as the commander of the fleet, led by Columbus, to India to buy spices. Shortly after Gonzalo de Córdoba left, Columbus was forced to leave his wife and children and come to Emden to make preparations and embark on his voyage again. For a sailor, a life of a wife, children and a warm bed at home is a luxury. As long as the employer gives the order, they need to board the ship, bid farewell to their families, and cut through the waves on the ocean. In order to let Columbus feel at ease on his journey, Marin announced before Columbus left that he would appoint Columbus's eldest son Diego as his personal guard. Moreover, Marin also told Columbus that when he arrived at the new fleet city in East Frisia, Diego would be trained as a fleet commander. Not only that, Marin also gave Columbus the two 250-class warships that he had taken to the Canary Islands. These two ships were ahead of their time, with faster speeds than current ships and more powerful firepower. Moreover, before Columbus set off, Marin prepared more than a dozen sacks of lemon leaf powder for Columbus and his men to make tea. Previously, Marin had kohler by several lemon-producing estates in Genoa, Italy, to provide lemon leaves for the great voyage. Years ago, a batch of lemon leaves ground into powder was delivered. It just happened that Columbus would need it during his voyage, so he loaded it directly on the ship. Columbus also treasured this very much because he personally confirmed that drinking water soaked with this unknown plant powder every day can indeed prevent scurvy. However, before Columbus set out, Marin repeatedly told Columbus to keep the secret confidential and not to tell the Spanish. For those sailors, Columbus only had to force them to drink water soaked in lemon leaf powder every day, and there was no need to explain anything to them. Besides, even Columbus himself only knew that it was a kind of plant powder, and didn't know what it was specifically. In order to train more sailors for the great voyage, Marin carried out a large-scale rotation of Columbus sailors. Many young Frisian sailors who had not participated in the last voyage to India were arranged to join Columbus' fleet. This time, because of the protection of the Spanish fleet, Columbus did not need to bring any soldiers. He just brought sailors, plus a translator and Draco who was responsible for trade. In fact, Marin was very unwilling to give up the huge profits of the spice trade. However, he did not have the strength to fight against the Portuguese at sea. Therefore, he could only choose to give the benefits to the Spaniards. However, giving up the benefits does not mean that Marin will give up. Before Columbus set off, Marin suddenly thought of a good solution. It is true that Marin gave the right to buy spices in India to the Spaniards, but this does not mean that Marin can only accept the reality of purchasing £50,000 each time. Because, Marin can't buy too much spices, but he can grow them himself. Marin thought of Grenada, the famous Caribbean country. Marin first knew about Grenada because the country was invaded by the US military in the 1980s. Later, Marin learned from the encyclopedia that Grenada is a rare tropical island without poisonous snakes and insects. The absence of poisonous snakes and insects means that the island is relatively safe and people are not likely to be infected with diseases by poisonous insects. Moreover, Grenada is the world's second largest producer of nutmeg, an important spice. Of course, that was in the future. However, it gave Marin inspiration. Since I can't buy spices in large quantities in India, why can't I grow my own spices and sell them? This thought suddenly popped up. Grenada is not a big island, but it can grow a lot of spices. You should know that in later generations, the total production of nutmeg in Grenada, which is only 344 square kilometers, actually accounts for 1/3 of the world's total nutmeg production, second only to Indonesia, reaching more than 30,000 tons. Of course, that is because of the large-scale use of chemical fertilizers in later generations, so the yield of nutmeg per mu is naturally very high. But even without chemical fertilizers, the output is only a few thousand tons, which is also very scary. You know, 1,000 tons is 2.2 million pounds. Now in Europe, 1 pound of nutmeg costs 10 shillings, which is equivalent to 2 gold coins. Just thinking about it makes Marin drunk. Of course, Grenada does not necessarily only grow nutmeg, but also sugarcane, as well as spices such as pepper, cloves, cinnamon, and ginger. So, the night before Columbus set out, Marin called Draka over and told him to buy a large amount of seeds of spices such as pepper, cinnamon, cloves, nutmeg and ginger after arriving in India, and to preserve them and bring them back. Although cloves, nutmeg, and cinnamon are not produced in India, they can be grown by purchasing whole nutmeg and clove seeds. As for cinnamon, although the cinnamon bark is purchased, Sri Lanka, the origin of cinnamon, is also very close to Calicut in the south of India, so cinnamon seeds can be purchased. If it really doesn't work, Columbus's fleet can also go to Sri Lanka to buy cinnamon seeds. In short, Marin intends to turn Granada into a base for producing various spices. However, considering that there were no people who knew how to grow spices under Marin's rule, he ordered Draka to buy a few untouchable slaves who knew how to grow spices in India when he bought spice seeds, and bring them back to be responsible for growing spices. Of course, all this had to be kept secret from the Spaniards. In this way, Draka boarded the fleet to Spain with Columbus, carrying Marin's instructions. In addition to purchasing spice seeds and Indian slaves who knew how to grow spices, Draka was also responsible for purchasing 50,000 pounds of spices, as well as saltpeter, copper ingots and other materials. After Columbus's fleet set off, Marin called Kohler and asked him to go to Genoa or Spain to find the navigator Amerigo. The reason for looking for this person is that Marin knew that he was such a famous navigator. Moreover, because Spain suspended its maritime exploration in America, Amerigo was not recruited by the Spanish. According to the information Columbus knew, Amerigo seemed to be still a captain in Genoa. When Columbus returned to Genoa from Spain, he met this person once. Now, Marin has the complete navigation data of Columbus's exploration of the West Indies. As long as he finds Amerigo, gives him a few ships, and gives him a copy of Columbus's navigation data, he can explore Granada. Although Columbus did not explore Granada, Marin knows that Granada is at the southernmost part of the Windward Islands. As long as he follows Columbus's navigation chart, he can first reach the Windward Islands, and then sail to the southernmost place close to the South American continent. Granada was a perfect place for Marin to settle in America because it had no poisonous snakes or insects. In Granada, colonists did not have to worry about dying from common tropical, incurable diseases such as malaria due to poisonous insects, as they did in other tropical areas. Once the colonists have adapted to the tropical climate of Granada, they can move on to other tropical regions. Therefore, in Marin's mind, Granada, with its good natural conditions and low mortality rate, is very suitable as a base for training colonists to adapt to the tropical climate. Then, Marin could use Granada as a springboard to covet important regions such as Brazil and Panama. At the same time, this place is also suitable for the cultivation of various tropical spices and the production of sugar cane. Colonizing Granada can be said to kill two birds with one stone. Chapter 295. At spring plowing time again. It was March of 1500, and the spring plowing work was in full swing. Prior to this, the prisoners of war had been supervised to open up 3,000 uglums of new fields 2 or 3 months before the spring plowing, and they were plowing together with the old fields. Because of the participation of 18,000 Saxon serfs and 7,000 Saxon regular infantry prisoners of war, the spring plowing was unusually fast. After all, that was 25,000 able-bodied men. In the past 3 months, Marin also urgently resumed work at several fertilizer processing plants and rushed to produce a batch of fertilizer blocks. Fortunately, there were enough dried dung blocks prepared before, so the fertilizer processing was very fast this time, and there was not much odor left. After all, those dung blocks had been dried for more than half a year. Then, these fertilizers were also applied in the fields by Marin's 3,000 serf workers who were responsible for fertilizer manufacturing and application, without anyone else's hands. However, because of this war, many people were awarded titles for their meritorious service. Therefore, Marin was very distressed to give away 10,000 ugrams of fiefdoms, which made him very sad. You know, these fiefdoms will not be taxed in the future. However, since they have made military achievements, they must be rewarded. Moreover, the results of this battle were so brilliant that it would be difficult for Marin to give less reward. This time, Marin not only granted 10,000 uglums of land, but also promoted the titles of Schwartz and Frundsberg to vice-baron. In addition, Stade, the leader of the 4th Phalanx, was promoted from a hereditary knight to a baronet. Steindorf, the leader of the Blackshirt Knights, was also promoted to a baronet. Kidd, who was responsible for destroying the Saxon pontoon bridge and hitting the high platform where the Duke of Saxony was located with artillery, also became a baronet, and Saul, who Marin valued very much, Marin also found a lot of excuses to promote him to a baronet. Seeing that the land of tens of thousands of ugrams was distributed after only one planting season in his hands, Marin felt that it was not easy to be a monarch. In fact, Marin was not happy to distribute the land. However, East Frisia has just stabilized now, and he can't have a gap with his soldiers because of the land distribution. Moreover, Marin already has enough labor to reclaim the swamp. The land of tens of thousands of yugrams that was distributed can still be taken back. After all, the new land that was reclaimed was paid for and manned by Marin himself, so it must still belong to him. Apart from Marin, the happiest people for the spring plowing were his subordinates who had tasted the sweetness before. Last year's bumper harvest had allowed them to enjoy all the benefits. For example, Schwartz and Frundsberg, who were granted 1,000 uglums of arable land last year, had an average rye yield of 500 pounds per mu, with a total yield of 6 million pounds. After Marin helped them sell half of the land, they made a direct profit of 50,000 gold coins, which simply made them stunned. You know, an ordinary barony, although the total amount of cultivated land is more than theirs, the per acre yield is not high, and the total annual income is only tens of thousands of gold coins, generally not more than 20,000. However, with the support of Marin, they used only 1,000 yugrams of cultivated land to create an income of 50,000 gold coins. What's more, they still have a lot of food in their family. Although those serfs also need a lot of food to feed, and the servants at home also need a lot of food. But it definitely doesn't take half as much. In other words, half of the family's food reserves, in addition to the necessary consumption, can still have a lot of surplus. Such days make them very happy. Now, the Schwartz family lived a good life of luxury. And Frundsberg also found a way to get his father to retire from the army and live in his fiefdom. Even Frundsberg's brothers, except for the eldest brother who stayed in his hometown to inherit the knight's territory, all came to follow him. After all, an annual income of more than 50,000 gold coins is not comparable to that of some poorer earls. What's the point of supporting a few family members? They all earned 50,000 gold coins. Adler, who had twice as much land as them, naturally earned 100,000 gold coins a year. However, Adler was rather miserable. Although he had gained a huge profit of 100,000 gold coins, it was all confiscated by his wife Liv. And he could only receive 1 or 2 gold coins of pocket money from Liv every day. Then, Liv herself, like the legendary dragon, hid in the room, covered the bed with gold coins, and rolled on them. Even for those knights who only had 100 yugrams of fiefdom, each person's annual income reached about 5,000 gold coins, which made those soldiers without fiefdoms extremely jealous. Of course, this also stimulated their enthusiasm for meritorious service and reward. Now, the morale of the soldiers under Marin was extremely high, and they were eager for another succor like the Duke of Saxony to give them military merits. As long as they got the fiefdom, the whole family would immediately become rich. Moreover, last autumn, Marin sent people to the border between Poland and Silesia to buy 10,000 cattle from the owner of a large Polish herd, up to 50,000 heads. The price of each cattle was less than 10 gold coins, which was very cheap. However, it took Marin's men a lot of effort to drive these cattle back from Silesia to East Frisia. Moreover, they could not pass through the territory of the Saxon nobles, lest they be detained by them. It was not until after the new year that Marin's men brought the tens of thousands of cattle back to East Frisia in batches. Fortunately, the spring plowing was not delayed. After the strong cattle were given copper nose rings, they were trained a little bit and became oxen for farming. Moreover, Marin's men also made an appointment with the Polish merchants who specialized in selling cattle, to buy another 20,000 cattle next year. Moreover, this time, Marin did not plan to wait until autumn, but directly sent people to buy cattle after spring plowing, even if the price was a little higher. Because, in addition to the need for arable land in East Frisia, Marin also planned to get some cattle to Granada to cultivate land and grow spices. The price of Polish cattle was not expensive, which was really a good deal. Even if the arable land was not used, some cattle could be killed for meat. 10,000 oxen and the original several thousand draft horses, plus the newly added manpower, this spring plowing was unusually fast. After all, in the past, only a few thousand draft horses were used to plow tens of thousands of yugrams of land, and on average each draft horse had to plow hundreds of acres of land. Therefore, it took a long time, and it was even a bit too late. This time, Marin used a huge team of 10,000 cattle and thousands of horses. On average, each animal only needed to do 1/3 of the previous amount of plowing, which greatly accelerated the spring plowing. The spring plowing that originally took more than a month was completed in half a month. Originally, Marin was going to let all the prisoners of war participate in the spring plowing. However, Marin later remembered that his curved plow and ox nose ring seemed to be a secret technology. Therefore, Marin only left the Saxon civilians who had become his serfs to help with the spring plowing. As for the 7,000 Saxon infantrymen who were to be sent back later, in order to prevent them from seeing the curved plow and ox nose ring, Marin directly sent them to dig ditches and canals in the swamp. While they were digging ditches and canals, Marin also organized carpenters to start building Dutch windmills. After all, even if the ditches were dug, equipment was needed to pump the accumulated water out of the swamp pools and drain it into the ditches. In this era, there were no mechanical water pumps, and manual pumping was too inefficient, and it consumed a lot of physical energy and food. Therefore, using Dutch windmills that turned day and night to pump water was the most economical choice. After all, no matter how big the swamp is, it can't withstand the windmills pumping water day and night. One windmill is not enough, Marin can add a few more. Anyway, these windmills can be disassembled and moved. After the water in this pond is pumped out, it can be disassembled and moved to the side of another pond to be re-erected, after pumping, moved to another place. When the swampland transformation is completed, Marin will have more than 100,000 ugrams of arable land, which is more than all the arable land in the East Frisian county and the barony of Varden combined.